Hello and welcome to the first episode of Keep Austin Safe. I'm your host, Jose Mendez, and thank you for joining us today. Now, this is a podcast that we'll use to discuss certain topics and issues that affect our community here in Austin, Texas. In this first episode of Keep Austin Safe, we will be focusing on a very important topic, and that topic is domestic violence. As we all know, domestic violence is a very serious problem that can have a great impact on individuals and families. And quite frankly, it's one of those topics that just needs to be talked about very openly. But first, did you know that the Austin Police Department domestic violence unit typically averages 8,000 cases of domestic violence a year? And that's a lot of cases. Joining me today are two very special individuals. Detective Francisco Jimenez. He's been with the Austin Police Department for 13 years, and he's currently a detective in our domestic violence unit. Also joining us is Marcy Alonso, who is the Community Engagement Coordinator with the Victim Services Unit. And Marcy and her staff provide support to those that experience this unfortunate situation. So we're glad to have you. So without further ado and diving into this important topic, Detective Jimenez and Marcy, welcome to the show. And it's very nice to have you.
Thank you for having me, sir.
So Detective Jimenez, we'll start with you. Do you have anything you want to open up with?
So I work for the APD Domestic Violence Unit, and we investigate any type of violence that's committed against family. And by that, we mean people who are related by blood, people who are dating, or people who are members of the same household. Within APD, we have different units that investigate different types of crimes. We investigate almost everything that's tied to family, whether it be aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon, serious bodily injury, assault by strangulation, simple assault where injury or harm was caused or complaint of pain. We investigate violations of court orders. We investigate things you wouldn't think of, like stalking and kidnapping, robbery by assault, burglary of a residence. We investigate a wide variety of crimes. And also, on average, approximately, about 20% of the homicides that happen each year in Austin are tied to domestic violence.
Well, thank you for that. Marcy, do you have anything you would like to share?
Thank you for bringing us here and spotlighting this crime that tends to happen in silos and silence. And it's an important conversation that we need to have so the community knows that we're here to help. As far as the Victim Services Department, they are there to help the community in whatever way possible and letting folks know their rights. And also, it can be the most traumatic and scariest day of that person's life. So we want to be there to support and help as best as we can.
Great. Now let's talk about what domestic violence is and kind of what it looks like. Detective.
So, like I said, domestic violence it's classified by family, right? And by family, you mean people you're dating, members of the same household, and people who are related by blood. It affects every group of people here in Austin. It does not discriminate on age. It does not discriminate on race, or it does not discriminate on social class, income level. It affects all members of our community. It affects both men and women alike. Statistically speaking, 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence, and 1 in 9 men are victims of domestic violence. Sometimes because of the stigma of being a victim of domestic violence, victims don't come forward. We do have those approximately 8,000 cases a year, and we believe those numbers to be a lot higher, but a lot of those cases are unreported.
Now, Marcy, we'll start with you. Is it essential to clear up some of the myths that may be associated with domestic violence?
I think so. I think one of the predominating myths is that domestic violence happens in low-income communities, that it only happens in neighborhoods that maybe we prefer not to live in. But the truth is that it can happen to anybody, regardless of your education, socioeconomic level, gender, sexual preference. It happens to everyone.
Okay. The detective.
Sometimes there's a myth or a stigma with being a victim of domestic violence. It's important that, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you step forward and you call 911, let us help you, let us investigate these cases. APD is here to help, and victim services and APD crisis are here to help, and we have resources for you.
Now that we're on the topic of myths, speaking with several people and just from personal experience of being a patrol officer for quite some time, one of the main myths that I heard often was that, let's say if there was an incident involving domestic violence, it seemed to be that men were more cautious to call 911 to report something like that because they just assumed that they would be the ones arrested for the assault. Can you kind of clarify some of the things with that and kind of go over for us, maybe for somebody who's having that thought process?
Yeah. So taking a step back, right? So when someone calls 911 for police assistance in a domestic violence incident, that 911 call taker is going to dispatch an officer or have an officer dispatch respond to the residents. Once the officers get there, they're going to talk to the people involved. They're going to get each person's side of the story. They're going to try to gather evidence. They're going to look at what's on scene, whether it be broken furniture, whether it be injuries. They're going to see if there's any witnesses, any video, and then they're going to look at an overview of the evidence, the statements, the injuries, broken furniture, and try to gather and ascertain what occurred. If officers are able to make a determination that family violence was committed, domestic violence was committed, and someone was hurt or injured, officers will make an arrest. Whether you be a male or female, it doesn't matter. Officers are going to do their thorough investigation to come up with the most affirmative conclusion of what took place using the evidence that they've observed and gathered.
Okay. So how does the Austin Police Department, how does it work together with teams in these types of cases? How can our community members ask for help? I know the clear-cut answer would be to call 911. But aside from just calling 911, what happens when somebody calls 911? Can you walk us through that process?
So when someone calls 911, a 911 operator will answer. Call taker will take the phone call. If you speak English, it'll go directly to our 911 call takers. If you speak a different language, we utilize Language Line, which has every language available, and they'll still provide that information to the 911 call taker and then dispatch officers. You can call 911, you can text 911, and even if you were to hang up on 911, dispatch would still send officers to conduct a choke welfare to make sure everything was okay.
Marcy, do you have any input on that?
Yes, I would add that additionally to that, the victim services counselors respond with law enforcement and they let victims know what their rights are. They educate them on any possible options that they may have, from protective orders, emergency protective orders, child custody, housing, any shelter that may be necessary, or maybe seeking medical help. Sometimes victims are hurt and they need to be transported. So the counselor's there to let them know that they have options.
And so to staying on this topic and calling 911, to give you an example, Detective, let's say, for instance, there's a domestic dispute at a house. And like we say, we call 911 or we have the ability to text 911. Now, let's say if the aggressor is in the same room as our victim and the victim is unable to call 911 or even text to 911, are there other options that could at least get the patrol response going? Would calling 911 and simply hanging up, would that do anything for our potential victims?
Yes, officers would still respond to a 911 hang-ups call and make sure that everyone's okay and provide help if requested.
So Detective Jimenez, what happens after a report is made? Could you explain to our audience in a very simple way what happens after a report is made and then what that process looks like? Because I know out there's a lot of questions coming from people. They say, I made a report, but what's next? I haven't heard from anybody. What can I do?
So when a report is taken, and let's just say the suspect was not there, a suspect didn't get arrested by patrol, and that case gets referred to the domestic violence unit for further investigation and further involvement. That case is assigned by two parties, which is the detective, which is investigating the criminal investigation aspect. And then you have our victim services counselors like Marcy, who focus on like the well-being of the victim, right? Helping the victim with counseling and trauma and all that stuff. And Marcy can talk a lot more about that, but it's unique in the way where you have essentially the criminal investigation, the detective working that aspect of it, and you have victim services who's working in concert with the detectives, but they're helping the victim in many different ways that the detective doesn't, So the detective's going to do a lot of the things that the officer did, which is talk to the victim, gather more evidence, try to complete an investigation over the crime that occurred, and then proceed with arrest warrants if it applies.
Okay. Now moving forward to resources. Resources are very important. Marcy, can you kind of go into detail about what resources are available?
Yes. So when someone calls and our law enforcement arrives, so does our crisis team. And our crisis team counselors are there just to triage that emotional trauma that has just occurred. So they will make sure that the person is okay, assess what needs they may have at that moment. And like Detective said, that eventually gets turned over to another counselor in the victim services in the domestic violence unit. So that counselor is going to actually hold hands with that victim for as long as the victim wants. And they're going to offer resources like educating somebody on protective orders, on child custody. Again, discuss if there's any housing options or maybe they need shelter. Are there any basic needs that are necessary like food, clothing? Maybe they have family and they need to get to another town. We'll assist in all of those things. And a lot of our counselors do speak Spanish. So there's that ability to communicate in Spanish directly with our counselors.
Oh, that's great. So we know that domestic violence is a serious problem and that our community needs to be better informed. With that being said, the Austin Police Department, along with other domestic violence prevention organizations, will be holding an open event to the public where they can come out, ask questions, and kind of get a better understanding of this topic altogether. Marcy, can you tell us a little bit about that event?
Absolutely. I'm excited too. This event is actually going to raise awareness and let the community be able to come and ask questions to professionals, because there will be a panel of experts there to discuss what domestic violence is, how it can be spotted, how to prevent it. And that will be taking place on Tuesday, June 3rd at the Ruiz Public Library. It starts at 6:30 and it goes on to 8 p.m. And again, it's an opportunity for the community to hear from the experts and ask any questions that they may have regarding domestic violence.
Okay. And Detective Jimenez, will you be there?
Yes, I will. Yes. So it's important to come out, ask your questions, get the resources that you need, and just come forward. Our role is to protect our victims of domestic violence and make Austin a safer place. So please come forward, ask your questions, gather your resources, and we're there to help.
Great. So before we go, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot. One more question. What would you say is the hardest part about the position that you're in? And we'll start with you, Marcy.
Thank you. I would say because of societal stigmas, a lot of times it is scary to come forward and report because of fear of being believed. So as a society, I think it's important to believe somebody when they tell us that they are going through this situation. I also think in doing this work, it's hard to know that your resources are not endless. We wish they were limitless, that we could help in every way we can. And that may not be possible. So we do rely on community partners such as SAFE, such as Eloise House, and our civil legal partners to help bridge those gaps and help our survivors access safety. And it's great to have those partnerships and work together with law enforcement and counseling services.
Great. Detective?
The hardest part would be the brutality and the violence of it. Unfortunately, like, our victims undergo horrible violence that no one should ever see or go through or have to deal with. And these victims are family to their abuser, right? They're victimized by the person who's supposed to protect them and love them, whether it be a father, a mother, a husband, a brother, a sister. and they inflict horrible physical violence, injuries, psychological abuse, and much more to our victims. So that's kind of the hard pill to swallow sometimes, is how much violence can be targeted at someone you're supposed to love and protect.
Yeah,
right. And having to also then call the police on that loved one who's committing that violence against you.
Well, I appreciate y'all being honest and very informative on this topic. I do want to thank our special guest for joining us today to talk about this important topic. We really do appreciate everything you guys do. I mean, in the end and through it all, your unit and your unit combined to become that voice for some of these victims. So I want to, show my appreciation for that. For those tuning in, thank you for joining us. If you or somebody you know is facing domestic violence, do not hesitate to ask for help. You are not alone. You can contact APD Victim Services at 512-974-5037. For more information about community events with the Austin Police Department, safety tips, news releases, follow us on our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X as Austin Police Department. We hope to see you all on Tuesday, June 3rd at the Ruiz Public Library. And we hope this conversation provides you with resources that help everyone keep Austin safe. Thanks again, and be safe.